There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock. Hey, you guys, it's Tuesday again, and it's time for episode 113.
Yeah.
Now, this time around, we have been doing a lot of true crime episodes lately, which, you know, because I'm into that and stuff. But a couple people asked, oh, when are you guys going to go back and do some more, like, paranormal type topics?
Yeah.
So I decided to go back to a topic that had been requested a few times a long time ago, and I'd been meaning to get around to it. And we hadn't gotten around to it, but we're going to get around to it today.
I can't believe that we haven't done this one already.
I can't believe it either.
This
is one of the granddaddy like conspiracy
Philadelphia
theories.
experiment.
Yes, and the Montauk Project, which I feel like is less well known, but is related to the Philadelphia experiment pretty directly.
I know why we didn't do this.
Why?
Because when the show was young and new, we were trying to do subjects that were not covered by other shows.
True, yeah. We were trying to do more.
This one was pretty common, so we were like, no, we'll blow that off. Other people have done that once. But now it's time to probably circle back around and give this the Jenny Ashford seal of approval or disapproval. Because once she gets,
know how I'm going to roll on this.
But the thing is that we have to claim sources. We got to tell the story about how it starts. Tell you the truth, Montauk, I don't really know much about it, but Philadelphia experiment, when I first heard about it, and I first heard about it in the 80s, I'd say probably mid to late 80s, I thought maybe it could have happened. There was some shit to it that kind of, but let's get into that.
Yeah, we
right?
will.
I think maybe some of it happened, but I think a lot of it was misunderstood. We'll get to that in a minute.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to be our topic for today, so it should be kind of fun. Let's see, we'll just do some really quick shout-outs. Our last movie review was The Howling, so go check that out if you haven't already. If you didn't notice, on Sunday, excuse me, I put up the first episode of a new little movie review show that we're doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of in a rough stage. You know, we're going to work on this show as we go to find out what format works the best.
Yeah, we just kind of decided to do it, like, and then a few days later we just kind of threw something together. Right, we're going to turn it into a show. As I said on the movie review, it's basically, since we're doing the Stubbs A-List program and we're seeing 3 movies a week in the theater, so we decided we were just going to do little short reviews of them while we're in the theater if we can manage it.
Yeah, and try to be able to get them out to you soon enough to where you can take recommendations, because we already review old movies. Well, let's review some new movies that are in there right now. It's just that we're not really sure whether or not we're probably going to polish that show, and it may take a few months for us to get it right to where it's, you know, easy to do, and then it comes out slick.
Yeah.
Wanted to be kind of slick and fun too.
Yeah. So what we were going to do is we were going to have like the 3 movies that we saw that week. We're going to do little capsule reviews of them, and then at the end of the week, I'll edit them all together, and then I'll put it up as like a separate show on Sunday. I'll put it in its own little playlist and stuff. It's just called 13 o'clock matinee with Thomm and Jenny. So we just wanted kind of a fun little show that made you guys feel like you were coming to the movies with us, and then we were just kind of like talking about the movies afterward.
Right, and it'll probably be about a half hour each one.
Yeah, like the first episode, if you haven't watched it yet, turned out to be 45 minutes, but that's because we had an intro and we lost one of the video feeds, but then we found it again, so I just put them both in there, so so that's longer than usual.
Probably more like 30 minutes of being.
But we're going to be shooting for like 20-30 minute show. And like I said, I'll probably put them up on Sundays because it's like beginning/end of the week, and it'll be all the movies that we saw the previous week, just kind of edited all together. Yeah. So hopefully you guys like that. That's just something new that we decided to do pretty much a couple days ago, and then like kind of just
we were doing it anyway. We might as well record it.
That's what we figured. Yeah. Right. And other than that, like I said, still got our Patreon going and everything like that. Wanted to say hi to our newest patron, who is named Denise. And also to one of our existing patrons, Tara M. She actually increased her support this past week, so thank you very much, you two. Also, if you want your story read on our Halloween episode, like I said, fiction, nonfiction, as long as it's a scary story, I've got like a shit ton of really good ones, so it's going to be like a really fun show. This is probably like your last chance to do it. We are actually going to be recording the Halloween show probably sometime between the 19th and the 21st of October. So if you would like the story on the show, then probably it'd be better to get it to me before the 19th. So just so we can make sure to get it on there.
Faceless Villain 2 is in the can.
It is, yeah. I finished recording it and I started doing the editing, and I haven't finished the editing yet, but it's all recorded. So that shouldn't be too much longer. I mean, hopefully, like I said, I've kind of got swamped with work this past week.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot of time to do.
Came.
Yeah, so I didn't have a lot of time to do much audio editing. But hopefully next week I'll kind of get all that out of the way, and maybe I can get it done and get it uploaded by the end of next week.
Yeah.
And so that should be available.
Do you know if you
pretty soon? What's that?
Do you know if you got any reviews on the hard copies of that?
Not that I saw. Okay. No.
All right.
But so
we've sold a lot of books.
Yeah.
No reviews yet on it.
Yeah, sold a lot of ebooks, sold a lot of print books. All right, so. And if you haven't noticed, like this episode, I decided to stop doing like the little movie clips at the beginning and the little music clips at the end. It was just too much of a pain. It's like I didn't want to run into copyright issues, things of that nature. It's just like I said, it was just too much of a pain to have to keep finding things, like finding theme songs.
Yeah, and the amount of material that we're putting out is expanding. So we have to maybe kind of hone things and polish things down to where we still can provide a really cool show, but it's not so labor intensive on Jenny, because she's doing all these shows and then the books and then all the graphic design from the graphic design business. So
yeah,
she's making packages. It's weird just seeing here. She's in here looking at boxes, and it's weird because it's like these are like boxes that you see in a grocery store, and I'm like, man, you made that. She's like, yeah. Well, the robots made it, but she did all the design.
Yeah, it's I sit there and measure the boxes and be like, okay, this little tab is
boxes
28 centimeters.
Yeah, and it's just like something that's gonna, and it's shit that's gonna end up in a grocery store. It's a trip.
Yeah.
The trip when your girlfriend's making that shit.
I know, it is pretty weird, right? You just walk into a store and be like, hey, I made that box.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm also kind of like I might still do news stories at the beginning, like if there's something going on that's like related to something we're doing, but I feel like that's something that I probably am not going to do every time either, because
only if it's important.
Like I said, only if it's important. Yeah. And the shows have been running so long.
Yeah.
Recently, I mean, shit, our last show about the harps and Bella Gunnis was like an hour and 45 minutes or something.
Some people are like, oh, let it run 3 hours. Well, hey, man, we got shit to do.
we can, but it's like,
we got to see Starry Night tonight.
Yes.
We got to help him set up. He wants us to be there around 7. If we can.
Shit. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Because it's gonna take about an hour to set up and get it ready, and we're gonna socialize, and then the doors open at 8, and then we know how it is every time they come into town.
Yeah, I know.
Man.
Yeah, we're recording this on Saturday, and actually tonight we're going down to downtown Orlando.
Yeah.
The Iron Cow. And we're going to see, which is like a new venue. They just opened up in the Milk District in Orlando. So we're going to see how it goes.
Man, it's stuck in my head so much. It's awesome.
We've been listening to it in the car pretty much over and over and over again. It's so good. It's so good. It's kind of
like a mixture of Sisters of Mercy's First and Last and Always album. And like with the epic nature of kind of like the Police Synchronicity album.
Yeah.
It kind of, you know what I mean? To me, it's like an epic goth album like that. Pretty neat.
And all the songs are good. There's
all
really
the songs
not
get stuck in your head.
Yeah,
and they're not poppy, cheesy, repetitive songs. They're really deep, man. I like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easily their best album. All their albums are good, but I mean
that one there, they're getting so much better.
Yeah, we've just listened to it over and over and over again. It's like I just never get tired of it. Let's listen to it again. All right. So let's get on with the Philadelphia experiment. Now, this is something that you know a little bit about. You said you didn't know much about the Montauk Project.
Stuff would come in and I'd hear about it. And this is back when we had to go to print media to find out about the Philadelphia experiment.
This is a very, very popular story.
Yeah.
Let's do the broad outline of the Philadelphia experiment. Some sources say it was just one experiment. Some sources say there were 2 of them. But basically the gist of it is that in the early days of World War II, that apparently the Navy was experimenting on this particular ship. It was actually a destroyer escort called the USS Eldridge. And they were experimenting with ways of trying to make it invisible, and either on purpose or accidentally, either ended up sending it into another dimension, teleporting it to Norfolk, Virginia, or sending it back in time, some say, like only about 10 minutes.
They actually made a movie about that.
Yeah. In the 80s they did.
In the 80s, yeah.
And there are also some of the more like horrific things about it are that the effects on the crew were said to be like really, really horrible. They said, a lot of them went crazy.
Materialized in between walls.
Yeah, a lot of them materialized. They were like fused with the hull of the ship.
Yeah.
A couple accounts said some of the people came like they rematerialized inside out.
Yeah.
Things of, or, some they would blink in and out of visibility like later on and stuff
and then
like
they
that.
had to cover this whole thing up and
right.
and make cover stories to explain why these guys died,
Right.
But it was weird because when these stories first started to appear, when I was a kid, they kind of sounded credible because there were variations on the stories.
Yeah.
Some investigators were saying no, they weren't trying to make it invisible to the naked eye. They were trying to make it invisible to radar.
Right.
And that they had some big cables. Witnesses said there were big copper cables wrapped around the hull of the ship. And that they had put some kind of generator and a primitive computer in there, vacuum tubes, to run a lot of electric power down through here to get this thing to maybe somehow deflect radar waves.
Right.
And that electromagnetic field maybe really hurt some guys that were on board. And maybe these stories about guys being fused in between bulkheads is an exaggeration. Maybe they were just somehow burned by radar waves. Because, you can get killed by a radar wave. It's like a microwave.
Yeah.
Real close. If you turn the combat radar on an F-15 on while it's on the ground, it'll evidently cook rabbits a couple 100 feet out in front of the nose of the plane. So maybe some investigators were thinking that maybe these stories were exaggerations of something that really happened.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking.
And I'm going to get into that a little bit later because that's pretty much my feeling as well. But apparently, like I said, there were supposedly the main experiment that they usually talk about the Philadelphia experiment, supposedly happened in late October of 1943. Some accounts also say that there was an earlier one that happened in July, and that in that one, it wasn't quite as extreme, but the ship kind of went partially invisible, and then there was like a green fog, and then like some of the crew members were like nauseated afterward and stuff like that. Yeah. But then they didn't do anything different. They decided, let's do another experiment. And then they did October. And then that was like the bad one where it went into a different dimension or whatever.
Yeah. And see all these little reports of green fog. I remember thinking at the time with the investigators that we were dealing with at the time and that maybe what they were talking about is like an aurora.
Yeah.
Like one of the theories is that you make an electromagnetic field around your ship. You have the crew on it. Okay. Then you hit the ship with a radar distant and see if it can deflect, or absorb those radar waves.
Yeah.
Okay. Thereby not giving a return signal. Okay. Well, that may be plausible. Okay. Yeah. And then part of the test is let's say the next part of the test is, okay, we're going to turn our radar on and see if we can get a signal off of the other ship. So in other words, we're denying the enemy the ability to see us, but we can see them.
Right.
Let's say they turn their radar on, but the radar waves aren't absorbed by the field. Instead, they're somehow bounced back into the ship, which harmed the crew. Which maybe this is where these stories are coming from. Guys that are partially cooked or partially killed or things like that.
Partially killed?
Partially killed, yeah. Partially. Well, you can see, they're partially killed.
He's only
death
mostly
is not an
dead.
Absolute in the paranormal. So death is not, I meant, partially wounded is what I meant.
I know, it's just funny.
Because there were all these stories about them being in and outside bulkheads and burned, and so in a way it kind of sounded plausible. Maybe they were doing an experiment with radar invisibility and people got hurt. So that was the thinking. That was my thinking at the time. Right. I really didn't buy into this teleportation. Now, I kind of was open-minded about this. Well, maybe if somehow you're messing with weird electromagnetic frequencies, maybe you could polarize the molecules or the atoms inside of a body. Maybe you could slip through some matter a little bit, but imperfectly, because matter is mostly empty space anyway.
Yeah.
It's just. I guess you could say it's the nuclear weak force. I think that prevents matter from going interpenetrating from other matter, something like that. I don't remember. I'm not a nuclear physicist, but who knows? Maybe when you're a kid, you're thinking maybe some electromagnetic field maybe could polarize matter.
Yeah.
The
problem with the Philadelphia experiment, though, and this is the kind of thing. Like I said, I'm the skeptic. It's like, pretty much I'm not buying most shit that I hear. And the thing that when you hear a story like this that sounds this implausible, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, where does this story originate?
Yeah.
Where did this story originate?
Where's the source?
So as it happened, it did not originate in 1943. It actually originated in 1955. Let's go back to 1955. There's this fella. He's named Morris K. Jessup. He's a writer. He's an auto parts salesman by trade, but he is also an amateur astronomer who's interested in UFOs. In 1955, he publishes a book called The Case for the UFO. And he's kind of talking about, I don't think he's talking about them really exist, but he's talking about if they existed, these are maybe some of the propulsion systems they would use and things of that nature. Now, after this book comes out, Jessup starts getting a series of letters from this other fella who is alternately named Carlos Allende or Carl Allen. And he's sending him all these letters. And in these letters that this random person sent to Morris K. Jessup, who had written a book about UFOs, this is where he first starts talking about the Philadelphia experiment. Nobody had ever mentioned it before this. This was just a guy who was writing letters to this person who said, he didn't say that he was on the USS Eldridge, which was the ship that supposedly disappeared. He said, I was on a merchant ship that was in the same dock in Philadelphia, and I saw these things happen. So that's this is where the story originates, from these letters from this person.
Okay, so basically what you have an amateur UFO writer. Yes. One of his fans tells him this story.
Yes.
Okay.
This is where this is the first this is the first recorded incidents of the Philadelphia experiment.
What's funny
story.
Is that if this were to happen today, it would happen online. It would be somebody making a video like us, and then somebody in the comment section coming in and telling you a story. But because this is all back in print media, it's in a way it kind of had some kind of weight to it.
Yeah.
There's more weight to information back then because there was less of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, in the letter, like I said, this Carl Allen or Carlos Allende person, he says, I saw all of this happen with the USS Eldridge. He's like, they were doing experiments. It was rendered invisible. It was teleported to New York, was the first thing he said. He also said that it went to another dimension and that there were aliens there.
Okay.
And he also said the whole thing about the guys being fused with the ship's hull. Now, Morris K. Jessup, to his credit, he gets these letters, he reads them, and he's like, this dude is crazy.
Yeah, because how would he know?
And he just ignored it.
How would he know that a ship disappeared and went to New York and came back when he was just witnessing it from another ship?
Right.
He wouldn't have been in on the experiment.
Right, exactly.
So he would just see it disappear and then it come back.
Right.
How would he know that it went to New York? Unless he claimed
that's the one thing that always bothered me.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the fuck did you know where it went? How did you know that it went to another dimension and that there were aliens there? How would you know that?
Right.
But apparently he said he knew, and he wrote these letters to this guy. Now Jessup was like, okay, whatever. He just thought he was a nut. Then he kind of forgets about it until about 2 years later, 1.5, 2 years later. In 1957, Morris Jessup, the UFO book guy, he gets contacted by the Office of Naval Research in Washington, D.C. And this office said, somebody sent us a package with your book in it, and it was all that, I don't think it had a return address or anything like that, but it just said Happy Easter. Somebody had sent them a copy of Morris K. Jessup's book, but they had annotated like all of this stuff in the margins. Now, these annotations were supposedly 3 different people discussing things that were in this book. It was 3 different colors of pink ink. And it was just that, like, none of the people were named really. Like, one of them I think was called Jemmy. The other 2 people didn't have names. This, like I said, is supposedly 3 different people discussing all of the stuff that Jessup was talking about in this book. And it was, like, really in depth. So the Office of Naval Research, the ONR, they're like, okay, well, here's Jemmy, here's Mr. A, and here's Mr. B. But they contacted Morris Jessup. They said, do you know who this person is? Like, why would they send us your book and stuff like that? But apparently they were interested enough in what the annotations said that they actually paid for like a small run of 100 books of Morris Jessup's book published with all the annotations in it. Right? It was just like a limited print run.
Who paid for this? The Navy did?
The Office of Naval Research paid for it. Just like 100 copies.
Okay, stop 1 second. So the Navy gets this book.
Yeah.
From this UFO writer. Somebody scribbled a bunch of fan fiction in the margins.
Yeah.
That was so compelling that the Navy wanted more copies of it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why. Like, maybe they did think there was, because like I said, Morris Jessup's book was not about the Philadelphia experiment. It was about alien propulsion systems. So, and a lot of the annotations were like commenting on that. And maybe the Navy thought some of the stuff sounded plausible enough that they thought it was interesting enough to just pay for like a small run of it.
That's weird. That's weird in itself.
Yeah, so this is called the Vero Annotations.
Yeah.
This book. Now, when they contacted Jessup, he's like looking at the annotations, and he says, okay, the handwriting, the misspellings, the weird like capitalization and stuff, he's like, that looks just like the letters that this Carl Allen person sent to me. And the Navy kind of looked into it too, and he said, yeah, I think this is the same person writing with 3 different pens, pretending to be 3 different people. Right. And obviously this person has some problems.
Although it sounds like he'd have been an awesome fiction writer.
He may have been, sure. So a couple years later, apparently Jessup was trying to publish more books, but wasn't really successful. And he ended up committing suicide after he had some kind of like personal.
That's right. He ran the damn exhaust pipe into his car, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Put a hose around the tailpipe and ran it in through the window, and that's creepy. And then it kind of adds some gravitas to the story. It makes you think that maybe he was on to something, and you know what I mean? They killed him or silenced him for it.
Well, see, that's always what they're going to say.
That's what they're going to say, but I see what it was, this failed writer, huh? Had other problems and.
Yeah, they said he had some personal problems as well. So I don't know if his wife left him or something like that. But yeah, so a lot of things, and he wasn't able to publish any more books. I guess he kept getting rejected and stuff. So so that's how that went. Now then, for a while, that was in 1959 when he died. Then there wasn't really any more popularization of the story until about 1963. And at this point, there was a book published that was called Invisible Horizons, True Mysteries of the Sea. And the guy that wrote the book was named Vincent Gaddis. And he actually had read the Vero annotated version of Morris Jessup's book. So he added the Philadelphia experiment to his book. You know, it was like a compilation of like weird sea stories and, you know, creepy, unexplained things and stuff. So he repeated it in there as though it was a real event. And then in 1978, 2 guys named George Simpson and Neil Berger, they actually wrote a novel called Thin Air that was based on the Philadelphia experiment. It was a novel. It was a fiction. But the problem being is that the year after that novel came out, then these 2 guys named Charles Berlitz and William Moore, the first of which, he was like a Bermuda Triangle guy, and the second guy was like a ufologist guy.
I remember Berlitz. He sold a lot of books. That was his shit. His shit was on TV a lot.
Yeah, he's very well known in like paranormal and UFO
This is back
circles.
like in the In Search Of era.
Right.
I remember that.
This was 1979.
Yeah.
So they actually collaborated on a book that was called The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, in which they pretty much they ripped off large portions of Thin Air, the fictional novel that was based on that was based on the Vero annotations, and then they also added a bunch of stuff of their own. So that's when the Philadelphia experiment really kind of came into the public consciousness. When there was this book that came out about it, like I said, where they had ripped off like a lot of stuff that was out of a novel. And then in 1984, that book was made into a movie, which is called The Philadelphia Experiment. It didn't do all that well in the theaters or anything.
Yeah, but they put that shit on HBO. I saw it.
But yeah, it was on HBO. I was on cable a lot.
Hangar 18.
Yeah, that was on Mystery Science Theater actually, on their very first.
Back to back. Boy,
Yeah.
those are the days.
Yeah. So the movie actually kind of helped to cement, the details of it in the public consciousness. Now, this movie is actually going to serve as the bridge between the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project, which you're going to talk about in the second half. But I'll get into that a little bit later. So, but that movie was kind of like the turning point for that. So, according to most sources, the Philadelphia experiment, what they were trying to do with it, allegedly, was that it was based on some aspect of Albert Einstein's unified field theory. That they were trying to get like large electrical generators that would make light waves go around an object, like to render it invisible. There were other things about it as well, but most of the sources say that even though the Navy, of course, has denied that it did this experiment ever happened, but most of the later researchers come out and say the USS Eldridge, which was the destroyer, the ship that goes along with the destroyer. It wasn't an actual destroyer, but it had the equipment put on it at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. And then there was supposedly a first test of it in summer of 1943. This was the time when the ship supposedly went mostly invisible, and there was like a green fog. And then, it popped back into existence, and like the crew were all sick and everything like that. Then evidently the equipment was not recalibrated, but then they did another test in October. And that was when you get the thing where it supposedly teleported and all this other kind of stuff, like people going crazy, fusing the bulkheads and all this other stuff.
Where are they getting this information?
Now, like I said, all of this information, and many, many skeptics have pointed out all of the details about the Philadelphia experiment, essentially, all come from these letters from this Carl Allen person.
Okay.
Who sent them to Morris. That is the first record of it. There's no records of it anywhere.
So they always go back to refer to those letters.
And most of the books that were written about it later on are basically just taking stuff either from the movie or from the original letters, that were published alongside the Jessup UFO book. So they're all pretty much just repeating from the same source again and again, rather than like trying to substantiate.
Yeah, and then this same source not only is talking about teleportation and this, what we call the Philadelphia experiment, he's also writing stuff about UFO propulsion and sending it to the Air Force of all places. I mean,
yeah. Well, the book was about UFO propulsion, and then he's annotating.
Now, why would he send that to the Air Force? Was there anything that he
to the Navy?
To the Navy. Why would he send that to the Navy?
I suspect that this Carl Allen person was a schizophrenic.
Okay, because why would he think the Navy would be interested in that? That's the weird thing,
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. I can understand maybe sending it to the Air Force. I haven't read what he wrote. I mean, was he trying to perpetrate a hoax, or was it? We're just gonna have to find out.
I just kind of feel like I don't know if he was necessarily trying to perpetrate a hoax on purpose, but I think that they don't know a lot about him. But if he is the person that they think that it is, he did have some mental issues, and it might be a case where, like I said, this is a very common thing in schizophrenics, where they're like very, very intelligent, but they come up with these like really grandiose schemes. Kind of schemes or like conspiracies and things, and I feel like that's what he was doing. So I don't think that he was trying to perpetrate a hoax necessarily. I just think that he maybe really did believe that stuff, and
he was maybe just trying to get involved, trying to be involved in the scene. I read this book, I liked it, and I'm going to put mine in. Here you go, Navy, check this out. Just that superficial.
It might have been that. Yeah. Like he might have been like, yeah, I know all about this stuff, and I saw a ship go into another dimension, and there was aliens there, and all this other kind of stuff.
He sends it to his favorite writer.
Yeah. I feel like that might have been as simple as it was.
Right.
Now, is there any basis in fact for the Philadelphia experiment? Now, some people have said that there might be. Now, obviously, the shit that happened, no one was fused to the bulkhead. It's fine. No, as far as is known, none of the crew of the USS Eldridge, at least the ones that are surviving that they've talked to, have said that anything unusual was going on at all. So,
this is where the Philadelphia experiment starts to break down, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's the crew and the ship. You know where the ship is at any time. You know where the crew are at any one time. And, that's like, it'd be like somebody coming in line about what the first and the 506 was doing back in 1990.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
Well, so were thousands of other guys. You couldn't say that we were talking to aliens in 1990 on the DMZ. You couldn't say that because there were too many living witnesses.
Well, you could say that.
You could say it, but the guys would come forth and go, wait a minute, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right, but then conspiracy theorists would say, well, they told you to tell, or they brainwashed you. Which is essentially exactly what people who believe that the Philadelphia experiment really happened, that's what they say about all the crew members that they asked about, because the crew members are like, really, there was nothing like that going on in the ship. There's nothing weird, nothing strange going on at all.
I would think that if there was a Philadelphia experiment, there would have been physical evidence left behind.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Number one, if the first experiment, which supposedly happened in July of 1943 with the green fog and everything, the USS Eldridge wasn't actually commissioned until late August of 1943. Yeah. And it was actually in New York, provably, until September of that year. So they're like, even at the time when the Philadelphia experiment was supposed to have taken place in late October 1943, according to the USS Eldridge ship logs, they were actually in the Bahamas. They were not in Philadelphia at that time.
Right. So that's against it.
So that's one thing that's against it.
Another thing that's against it, let's say they came up with some kind of technology that could make something disappear, or even cause a green fog, or cause radar indivisibility, or cause interpenetration of matter. Even if guys got killed, they wouldn't stop experimenting with it. They'd continue.
Yeah.
They'd continue working with that.
Yeah.
Well, by now, it would be a known technology.
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah.
But see, the thing is, so what a lot of later researchers have said, and what a lot of people who were actually on the crew of the USS Eldridge have said, they're like, maybe what happened, they're like, okay, so, the USS Eldridge, it was in Philadelphia. There was another ship there also, and there was a bunch of merchant ships and stuff too. So he's like, now, one thing that we did do during World War II, and a lot of other ships did this also, was, like you were mentioning earlier, is called de-gaussing or de-perming, where you would take, like, big cables, like you said, you kind of wrap them around the hull, you shoot, like, high voltage currents through it, and it doesn't make the ship invisible, like, to the naked eye. It makes it invisible to magnetic mines and magnetic torpedoes, which was a big problem during World War II because the Germans, thought the U-boats, like, coming up the East Coast, and they were trying to, like, get supply ships and stuff like that. So they were trying to make the ships, they were trying to, like, mess up the magnetic signature so that mines and torpedoes wouldn't hit them. So they're like, if somebody on a merchant ship that didn't know anything about that heard, like, some crewmen talking about, we're going to make the ship invisible, maybe they thought we were talking about, like, actual invisible rather than invisible to mines and torpedoes.
I don't have any naval experience or anything, but I also thought that de-gaussing had something to do with demagnetizing the ship's hull so your compasses would read accurately.
Oh, I don't know.
I think that might have been part of it also, but, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because they used magnetic compass back then, and, if you have an all-steel structure, it's possible that you might have certain things kind of magnetized over time.
Right, yeah.
And it might affect the compass just slightly. And if you're dealing with big distances, just a half a mil of deviation, it ends up being a lot if you're going to travel 500-mile leg to a trip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It might put you off course.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we might have some seamen in there that might know about it, but I think de-gaussing also had to do with keeping your compasses regulated, basically.
Yeah. There was also another experiment that was done on a different destroyer, which was called the USS Timmerman. Now, they had a generator on there that actually produced some, like, light coronas. No one on the crew was injured or anything like that. But they said so that might have had something to do with it. Also, the area of Philadelphia where the particular ships were docked, where the supposed experiment took place, there's a lot of St. Elmo's fire in the area, so like light coronas in the sky and stuff like that. So that could have added to the confusion as well. There's
or
also
maybe added to the inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. That
Be
might have been
they
added on to
saw
it.
this stuff and said, you know what? Imagine if this was happening. Imagine if that happened.
Right.
And then it just becomes part of his, science fiction fantasy.
Yeah.
Really. I kind of think that the guy who wrote that knew that it didn't happen. I think it was fan fiction.
Yeah, like I said, it's completely possible. They have established, they think that this Carlos Allende person was actually a guy who was just named Carl Allen. He lived in Kensington, Pennsylvania, and he did have mental illness issues, according to his family. So if this was indeed the guy that had started the whole thing and wrote the letters that started the story about the Philadelphia experiment, then he might have been, like you said, he might have been really believed it, or he might have just conflated all these things in his head and wrote this crazy.
I tend to think that what it was is that was his favorite author, and he liked what the author wrote.
Yeah.
And he says, I can do that. Here's another subject. I think it was more like fan fiction.
Yeah.
How much you want to bet that he only half believed what he was reading about the UFOs?
Yeah.
So he goes, oh, you're going to tell me a tall tale? I'm going to tell you a tall tale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can do that. And then he invents a cool story that stuck.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he might very well have been on a merchant ship and saw the USS Eldridge and saw the USS Engstrom, which was the other thing.
And then, he's going to, maybe at the time he was going, time travel, or something
because
like that.
Something else he said, a couple other things he said did have some kind of parallels in reality.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things he said was that the ship teleported, right? Now, one of the crew members of the Eldridge, or of the Engstrom, which was the other ship that was docked there next to it, he said, okay, well, if you want to say that the ship teleported from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, which is what they usually say, he's like, here's how that could have been misinterpreted. He's like, okay, now a merchant ship would have had to go around the outside of the East Coast if you were going from Philadelphia to Norfolk. He said it took about 2 days. He's like, however, the Navy was allowed to use Chesapeake Bay, and there's a canal inland. Now, no one really knew about it. They were trying to keep it on the down low because they didn't want the Germans to find out about it. But that was how they were safely transporting ships. They were keeping them inland, and only the Navy could use those canals. So they're like, so the route from Philadelphia to Norfolk only took 6 hours rather than 2 days. Right. So he's like, so if someone on a merchant ship was like, oh, suddenly they're in Norfolk only a couple hours later, how the fuck did that happen? They must have teleported. So he's like, so that might have been the germ of that story. Right. There was also a story
the merchant guys noticing that the military ships were getting there faster.
And we're just, well, they must be experimenting with teleportation. They said that might be why. They said because most people that were on merchant ships and stuff wouldn't have known that the Navy was taking these inland canals to avoid, being seen and whatnot. There was also stories about, like I said, that some of the crew members afterward, this is a very famous story, had been in a bar and they had been flickering in and out of invisibility.
Yeah, that's how
each other. Where they were fighting and stuff. Yeah. Okay, well, one of the guys who was there, he said there was actually a bar fight that night. It was 2 different guys from 2 different ships, and someone was talking shit. The other one, they started a fight like you do.
You're supposed to.
And he's like, I'm one of the guys that usually in the stories is said to have disappeared. He's like, all that happened was that me and my buddy were underage, and we weren't really supposed to be drinking. And so when this fight broke out, all this trouble started, a couple of the barmaids were like, psh, God, come get out the back, so you don't get caught because you're underage. So we just kind of skedaddled and went back to the ship without it telling anyone where we were going. And then the barmaids were like, wait, I don't know, we didn't see him. So they're like, that might be why people were like, Carlos, oh, the guys just disappeared.
Was Allende there maybe?
See, I don't know. He might have been because he did seem to know details about this. Like I said, he never claimed to be I don't think he ever claimed to be in the Navy or on one of the ships that was supposedly affected. He was supposedly on a merchant ship that was docked in the same place.
It could have been that he heard about that fight.
Or that he heard about it from someone that he knew. Sure, he didn't necessarily have to be there.
Pulled that out of thin air because they were normally fighting in those bars anyway.
And he just got lucky.
Yeah.
He got lucky, and he got lucky that two guys there that night
Oh,
were like,
yeah.
"Yeah, we totally disappeared because we were underage and we
Yeah.
weren't supposed to be drinking in there." So the barmaids like snuck us out the back.
I mean, there were places in Korea. I don't know, a famous place in Korea down Seoul. It still exists. It's called Hooker Hill. All right.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's still hookers on it, but in those days there was. You could say, yeah, there was a fight in Hooker Hill. Well, of course there was a fight in Hooker Hill. There was a fight in every bar on Hooker Hill every fucking night.
It's a Hooker Hill bar. They
Hooker
fight.
Hill,
That's
yeah,
what
it was
they
nothing
do.
but army versus army.
Yeah.
Guys from different army units fighting each other.
Yeah.
And nobody really got seriously hurt. It was just, this is how it was.
That seems to be the case
Yeah.
in this thing. But see, so like I said, there are actually real life, nothing exciting. It's like, no, we were just degaussing the ship, or it was just St. Elmo's fire, or there was like a light corona from a generator. These guys were in a bar and they just snuck out the back because they weren't supposed to be there. Stuff like that. Inland canals, like the Navy gets there like way quicker than the merchant ships could, so they must be teleporting. So there's like a realistic kind of component of where the story could have come from. And then evidently this Carl Allen either saw it or heard about it from somebody he knew and just decided he was going to confabulate the fuck out of it and say, yeah, the ship disappeared, went back in time, there was aliens, and then he added all this stuff to it. And over the years, the story kept getting picked up and repeated, in both fiction and nonfiction venues. And I think it just kind of became, it kind of reminds me of the SS Orang Medan, that ship that supposedly had the frozen people on it and all this other kind of stuff, where it's basically, it was first published as a fictional story, like a creepy story, and then it just kept getting republished and republished. It's now everybody thinks it really happened, except it never did. It was first published as a fictional story. And I think the same thing, weren't we talking about when we did that Toad in the Hole show about the pterodactyl and everything? Again, that was something it was first published as a parody or like a funny story, and then it just kept subsequently getting more
realistic and more like it really happened.
Like people started publishing it in books on the paranormal and stuff and adding more details. So it's like a game of telephone. And I think that's essentially what happened here. Like I said, people that believe it really happened, nothing you say, like all the crew members that say, no, I was there, nothing really happened. The conspiracy theorists are going to be like, oh, well, that's what they told you to say, or they brainwashed you or whatever. And we'll get into that a little bit with the Montauk Project too, because there's a lot of brainwashing going on in that one, evidently too. But so I
know it's funny that you say that they're brainwashed. You know where else that happened? That damn UFO Pet Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah.
Some of the Rendlesham Forest witnesses don't quite line up with the more reputable witnesses. And his story is that the people who saw what he saw all got drugged and brainwashed and debriefed and and were made to kind of forget it or not talk about it.
I'm
other
just,
guys that were there says, man, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I'm just like, we'll probably do a whole show on Rendlesham Forest, because
I want to do Rendlesham Forest, and really
that's been requested a couple of times.
There were some good witnesses to that, but really what it amounts to is lights in the sky and some light, something giving off light, and it looked like it was dripping sparks going across the field out in the trees. What it is, nobody knows, but it's pretty interesting. Now, evidently, some new stuff has surfaced about radar signatures that the radar tower got, but I don't know. Then there's other guys that come up with number codes in their heads that they wrote down back then, and oh, look, I still have it after all these years. Fishy.
Well, and the problem too is that, and like I said, this is why, and I know I sound like a big skeptical asshole. It's like I can't just rely on people's memories or people's stories about something, because memory is not reliable. It's just not. No one's is.
And people tell stories.
Yeah.
Like the best part of the story is the guys that walked up on the little triangular craft. Not everyone there agrees to have seen that craft, which that's kind of shit. You would think that if it was a group of 5 guys, you would think that all 5 of them would see that craft, not like 2 or 3. You know what I mean? It's just.
I mean, seriously though, it
Nah.
just from a personal point of view, and like I said, I'm a very skeptical person. I'm a rather reasonable person. I'm not like subject to like flights of fancy or anything like that. But even I have had trouble. Like sometimes I'll have dreams that are pretty like realistic, and then after a week or two goes by, I can't remember if it really happened or if I dreamed it or not.
Right, yeah.
Because like sometimes I'll dream something,
Yeah,
and then
memory
I'll
isn't that
dream
good.
that I'll tell you. And then I can't remember if I actually told you in real life or if I dreamed it. So even then, it's like memories are really not reliable. So if you're
Yeah, it's
just
like-
going by one person's story,
Yeah, it's like you remember something from your childhood, you remember what it looks like and everything, and then you come across that item again 30, 40 years
And it's
later, you look
nothing
and you go,
like you
that's what that
remember."
was? It
Yeah.
says, I don't remember actually looking. That's all it was? Is that kind of, yeah.
well, in the
Because
same
your
yeah.
memories of what it actually looked like was, you know.
The same things happen like when we've been revisiting like movies that we
Yeah.
haven't seen since we were kids, and a
Yeah.
lot of times they're way different than I remembered. Sometimes
Yeah.
not, but usually they are.
Like I just remembered, I just mentioned Hangar 18.
Yeah.
I loved that as a kid. They used to show it on HBO all the time. I saw it recently. It's unwatchable.
It really is.
It's unwatchable. It's like it was like a made-for-TV movie that got rejected for television. That's how bad it was.
We didn't even want to give it to cable.
Yeah,
They'll watch it.
That's how bad it was. And I remembered it being awesome. You
Like
know?
I said, it was
yeah.
on Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
It was like because it was like in the public domain or some
It's
shit.
terrible.
Yeah, it really is bad. I have a hard time watching it even on Mystery Science Theater.
I don't know why I loved it when I was 12 or 13. I thought
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Well, you know, shit
Standards are
happens.
different.
They are, yeah. And like I said, you're really not even the same person that you were
Right,
in that
yeah.
age. Was considering all the cell,
Yeah.
the cell destruction and like remaking and stuff.
Yeah.
So you're like not even really the same organism.
You're
I know
just
that's like
kinda
weird to
carrying
think
on
about.
the same memories of what
Pretty
you used
much,
to be,
yeah. But like I said, even your memories are shit.
Yeah.
They're just really not good. I don't remember a lot of stuff from my childhood at all. But anyway, so let's take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about a related supposed government project that was supposedly covered up that happened 40 years later called the Montauk Project. Lesser known, but kind of ties in with the whole Philadelphia experiment thing. So we will talk about that when we get back. We will be back in just a couple minutes.
Okay, everybody. Jenny's got some new shirt designs up. 4 of them. Really good ones, too. Atlanta Ripper, Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm, the H.H. Holmes Murder Castle, and of course, Demon Child, because man said he could. These are updated designs. I think they look really cool. Jenny did a great job on them. Were they fun making, Jenny?
They were very fun. And thank you very much. I think they came out very good.
Yeah, they get really good. They're very high quality shirts. Jenny and I wear our own shirts at certain times when we're trying to put a spotlight on ourselves, and you can put a spotlight on yourselves. If you go ahead and pick up one of these shirts today, you guys are going to love them. Links in the description, www.zazzle.com at 13 o'clock.
Yeah, so go check out our store at www.zazzle.com/13 o'clock. We got these 4 cool new t-shirt designs plus all our old ones if you'd rather get one of the old ones. But these ones are awesome and you should check them out.
They're also available in women's cut, and they look really cute. Jenny's got some.
So thank you. Go check them out.
end of the day that this house is very much haunted and will continue to be haunted for a very long time.
Okay, we're back. Now, on this segment of the show, we're going to talk about an interrelated conspiracy theory series of experiments known as the Montauk Project. This is considerably less well known, I feel like, than the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah.
It's probably better known nowadays because I don't know if most of our listeners are aware, but the very popular Netflix series Stranger Things was actually loosely based on the Montauk Project. And in fact, when the Duffer Brothers first pitched it to Netflix, the series was actually titled Montauk and was set on Montauk, Long Island, where these experiments allegedly took place. Only later on was the title changed, and they changed the setting to Indiana.
I don't remember this one.
But yeah, so this is kind of much like on Stranger Things. This has to do with a series of experiments on people, particularly children. And it's supposedly looking into doing time travel, opening interdimensional rifts, psychological warfare, all kind of things.
Okay.
So yeah.
So what year are we talking about? When did this appear?
This was the early 1980s that it first got heard about. Although, as I said, there have been some tie-backs with the Philadelphia experiment. So according to the people who came up with this stuff, apparently they've been ongoing since the Philadelphia experiment because these are two related things.
Do you think maybe this is where maybe Stephen King got his idea for the Mist? The Montauk?
It's possible. It's not real similar.
The timeline isn't... Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now, again, you have to ask yourself, yes, there is a decommissioned Air Force base on Montauk, Long Island. It is still there. There's a big radar dish. They don't do anything there now, apparently. But I guess there had been like some stories circulating. There was like some secret military experiments like going on under there. Like, you know what I mean? You can still go to the site. You're not really supposed to crawl around in there, but you can still see it. There's still some stuff there. Now, again, just as in the Philadelphia experiment, where does this story come from initially? Now, whereas the Philadelphia experiment came from letters sent to a guy who wrote a book about UFO propulsion, this evidently came from one guy's supposedly recovered memories of being a subject of this particular series of experiments.
Okay.
This guy's name was Preston Nichols. And evidently he just recovered some memories that he had been subjected to these experiments, like he'd been abducted, and that he was subjected to all these really weird experiments where they were trying to do, like I said, they were trying to do like teleportation, telepathy, psychological warfare, that type of thing. And he starts writing a bunch of books about this alleged series of experiments, him and this guy named Peter Moon. They write a series of books called the Montauk Project series. Now, in these books, interestingly, they don't come out and say that they're fiction, and they don't come out and say that they're nonfiction. Like the little notes at the end use phrases like soft facts. Okay. You can read it as fiction or nonfiction. It's still a good story. It says that kind of stuff. So this is like a whole series of books about this, and these started to come out in about the early 80s. Now, how this ties in with the Philadelphia experiment. See, so this guy, this Nichols person, is saying, yes, I was subjected to all these, and I was brainwashed, and I forgot about it, but now I remember, so I'm writing this series of books about it. So in 1988, this other guy named Al Bielek, I guess is how you pronounce his name, he was 57 years old at the time. He watched the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, and it supposedly triggered his own repressed memories of how he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. Now, this is very convoluted, so excuse me if I get the details kind of wrong.
No, I'm going to starting to hold on. See how I'm folding my arms? I'm folding my arms. That's not word.
That's my skeptical.
That's my skeptical position. I'm kind of like bracing myself for this.
Yes. So this Al Bielek person, if I'm pronouncing, or Bielek, or however you pronounce it, so he's like, okay, the movie made him remember. It's like, yes, the Philadelphia experiment is real, and I was on the ship when that happened. I was involved in it. He says that Nikola Tesla was there, and that he figured out how to make the Eldritch invisible. Okay. But while he was doing that, he sort of, oopsie, opened up a wormhole into the future that sucked the Eldritch in for a brief time. Now, Al Bielek also claims that he's like, oh, Al Bielek isn't actually my name. My real name is Edward Cameron, and they actually gave me a new identity after all this happened. Like I said, this is very convoluted, so try to stay with me here. So here's the time wormhole. So this Al Bielek person who says back then when he was on the ship, he was actually named Edward Cameron, and he also had a brother named Duncan Cameron, and they were on the Eldritch when the ship got sucked through the wormhole, and they jumped out on Montauk in 1983. The military saw this happen and sent them back through the wormhole so that they could destroy the shit that was on the Eldritch that had accidentally opened up this time portal
A la the movie.
to 1983. Yes, he said that's the movie.
That's what...
Conveniently, he watched the movie and he's like, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly what happened.
I kind of feel like some people have trouble separating movies from reality.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, some movies are inspired by reality.
They are.
And some movies are someone trying to express something that's real, like in James Bond. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it didn't literally happen that way.
Yeah.
You know?
So another thing that
ridiculous
this
though.
that this Al Bielek person claimed.
Time travelers.
He said that he'd had his memory wiped and that they had given him this new Al Bielek identity because that wasn't really his name. He also said that he'd been de-aged or they'd messed with his aging process, which would explain how he could be a certain age and everything. Now, he also said that his brother, Duncan, now this is kind of weird. He said that Edward, in 1963, had told his dad, you and my mom need to have another kid because Duncan, who was his brother back on the USS Eldritch in the 40s, needed a portal, like he needed, he called it a walk-in soul. Like he needed another brother, like for Duncan to come into and be that person, like going forward. Okay, so I'm just telling you, I'm not
rubbing my eyes.
Yeah, okay. I'm just telling you. So at this point,
this shit is very much like something from another era. This is the kind of fucking lies that people told in the fucking 80s.
Yeah. So at this stage, Preston Nichols, who had written the book about the Montauk Project experiments, and this Al Bielek person who said, yeah, it totally happened, and it was related to the Philadelphia experiment. There was a time wormhole from 1943 to 1983, and we were trying to close it and all this other kind of stuff. So then they kind of got together and started talking about all the experiments. Now, one of the main things, and like I said, this is where Stranger Things got a lot of the ideas about 11, the psychic girl, where she could she opened up a rift in time space and brought a monster through there, which they call the Demogorgon on the show. But this that's something that they kind of got from this. So apparently, one of the experiments that they were doing like remote viewing shit kind of stuff too, but they had this one thing that was called the Montauk chair. And it was apparently this chair that amplified psychic ability, I guess. So Al Bielek said that his brother, Duncan, was like the best psychic. And he was like a kid at the time, I guess. I don't really know how the whole timeline works out because, like I said, they're going back and forth in wormholes and all this other kind of stuff. Man. So I don't know. So
I wish reality was this exciting in real life. Don't you? I mean, I fucking experienced poltergeist phenomenon.
Yeah.
I had a near-death experience from a motorcycle accident. I had an OBE.
Yeah.
But it wasn't this exciting.
That's nothing.
It was not that exciting.
Not really.
Yeah.
It is kind of a shame though.
Where I'm jumping through wormholes and portals and telling my parents to have more children, and all this, and the government's involved. And no, I wish.
Yeah.
I wish it was that cool.
Do you?
I wish it was that cool, but there are paranormal things that happen. I've seen them, but they're just not this. They're not this intricate.
They're not this flashy. I feel
they're not this flashy, and they don't involve government agencies, and they don't involve. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way. It's usually something that's, in a weird way, a mundane situation, you know?
Yeah.
Where unusual shit happens in a mundane situation.
Well,
You've seen it.
Yeah.
It'd be like we were out there, you know, and the TV remote and weird doorbells ringing. It's weird. You can't explain it.
But it's not
that far
like a movie.
It's not like a movie where there's a big plot to it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's a meaning to it. It doesn't.
Well, and like I said, I think we mentioned on our little matinee video when we were talking about, I think we were talking about Venom.
Yeah.
And we were talking about poltergeist activity, that it's actually kind of started up a little bit again. Mostly it's little shit. The TV keeps turning itself on.
There's an article of clothing that is still missing.
Yes. I had an article of clothing that disappeared into thin air.
Under weird situations.
Under very weird circumstances.
We were kind of getting it on. And we never saw that article of clothing again.
And I can't figure out where it went to. I don't see how it could have gone that far. I mean, you know, I don't know.
Hell of an orgasm.
I guess it was. It opened up a fucking rift in space time and it disappeared.
It was a long T-shirt / dress.
Yeah, it was like a night dress.
Yeah, it's missing.
I have no idea where it could have gone.
It's been gone for over a week, and the cat couldn't have taken that anywhere. It was too big.
Yeah. And
we would have found it by now.
And she gets bored of dragging things around. Like, she'll drag things around for a little while, but usually she only drags them a few feet.
Never saw it again.
Or she puts it under the bed. She puts everything under the bed, but it's not under there. So
the
I have no idea
TV's been turning off and on again.
Yeah, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know. It's just creepy. It hadn't
done it in over a year.
Yeah,
and it's not the same TV, and it's not the same cable service that we had when it used to do it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's nothing like, you know, we're not seeing like specters or anything like that, but it's just weird, creepy shit like that.
It has to do with emotional state.
Yeah.
Been working out a lot. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe it is. You're getting all the rage hormones.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, so one of the experiments that they were supposedly doing in this Montauk chair that Duncan was doing, because like I said, he was supposedly like the biggest psychic, and this whole thing was predicated upon, like I said, much like in Stranger Things, where they're abducting children and doing all these experiments on them, so they're like, you know, they're doing it against their will, essentially, is what they're claiming. So evidently Duncan would sit in the Montauk chair, and they would do this experiment, which is called the seeing eye, which again, very much like some stuff they were doing with Eleven on Stranger Things, where they would give him an object that belonged to somebody, and then he could see out of that person's eyes, and it worked on anybody. They said he could, so it's essentially like remote viewing. So there was kind of that experiment too. This Bielek and the other guy, Nichols, are claiming that there's like a whole bunch of different subjects that they call the Montauk Boys, that they got abducted from their homes and taken to Camp Hero out on Montauk, Long Island, where they were doing all these experiments on them, like in like underground bunkers and shit like that. They also said that they could time travel, that they could travel to Mars, because, you know.
It's just too much for me.
It's like, if you're going to come up, just pro tip, if you're going to come up with a story like this,
it just can't be like that.
Tone it down several notches.
What?
Tone it down.
It's fan fiction is what it is. And I guarantee you, this kind of goes along the way, and some people might get mad at me. Philip Corso. All right, Philip Corso, he was anyway, I'm not going to get into it. It just... The more a guy tells stories, when he's bullshitting, the bigger that story gets with time, because he starts to accrue all these fans. So the fans keep pressuring him to tell
building
more
onto
and
it
more
also.
and more. So it starts to go from, alien technology, there was a UFO. Oh, we have the UFO. Oh, we can build the UFO. And you know what? We can also... build time machines. I saw a time machine. I went through the time machine. It just starts to grow, you know. And the truth stays about the same. Okay, which I can say one thing about the Rendlesham Forest incident. That story did grow, but it took a long time for it to grow, and only certain guys, their stories grew, you know. I think his name is Holt, Colonel Holt. His story remained consistent, and I think he's a good man, and he's saying what he saw. Saw lights in the sky and something looked like an eye, dripping molten stuff. But you have some guys that just, you know, straight up, they're gonna fucking tell a big story.
Well, every time you see them tell it, they add more and more details.
Now I can go back to another one that to me it just sounds strangely true. That old drunken hillbilly that could put a camera up to his eye and force
yeah. I can't remember the guy's name, but I know who you're talking about.
He could do that for a certain period of time, then it went away. Then he had a big reunion as an old man with the original guy, and they tried to do it, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It stands to reason that if the guy was a fake, all right, he would have waited the 50 years or the 40 years, right, and come back and done it.
Yeah.
You know? He couldn't do it.
I still got it.
Couldn't do it. Yeah, he couldn't do it. And he drank and everything. He had to be drunk to do it. And that's a weird case. Yeah. Some people say that maybe he was slipping something with a little tube. And
That's
playing
usually
a game.
how that trick is done.
But the
Sorry
weird
to
thing,
spoil it for you guys,
yeah,
but that's
the
usually
weird
how
thing is that some of those photos were photos of things that actually existed, but they were slightly different.
Yeah.
Like the struts on the airplane wings were backwards, things like that. One of them was a caveman that came from the Museum of Natural History. You know, they took a picture of it.
You probably wouldn't be able to get away with that now because you can just do like Google reverse
photo
image search, and like you could find every single photo. You're like,
Yeah.
here it
But
is.
they never caught him.
Yeah.
They never caught him. And he had
was wild.
What do you think? You think it was a fake?
Yes.
You think it was fake? Okay.
Yeah.
He was doing it like that?
Yeah.
With a tube.
Yep. All right. So here's
What was he called? An oculator? Some weird shit like that. He had a name.
That sounds
for
like a
too.
weird sex toy.
Oculator.
It's like a dildo with like
had a name
with
for it,
like
but
a
I
camera
forgot.
on the end of
He had
it.
a
So you
name
can
for
like
it, but I forgot what it was. That was a crazy dude. I was buying it, and then he did it to the video camera, to the TV camera. He looked at the TV camera and put an image in it. That was some weird shit, man.
bitches.
I
Yeah.
hadn't seen it in a long time, though. I'd have to revisit it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I feel like, yeah, we see like a lot of stuff. Like I said, I used to read all those like paranormal, like
Yeah.
unsolved mystery type books and stuff. And I'm like, ooh, weird. But then like if you revisit it
you
later on,
probably go, oh, that's all it was.
you're either like, yeah, that's not how it really happened, like how
Yeah.
they wrote it in that book, or it's not how you remembered it. It wasn't as weird as you remembered or whatever. Okay, so
Enfield still blows me away, though.
yeah.
Enfield did. This House is Haunted. That book. Yeah. Because that was just like mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, some of it's bullshit. I think some of the witnesses exaggerated what they saw. But
Yeah.
in general, that was a real case. Just saying. Just tell them. Just word to the wise people. Get that book. That book. Most of that really happened. Now, I can't really, the crossing guard that saw her, that said she saw Janet floating up through the window. How could you, it's just one witness saw that. Maybe that didn't happen. But in general, I think the stuff that Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair, what they saw, I believe that they were truthful because it matched up with the kind of phenomena I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my family saw it, yeah.
So the whole thing, like I said, a lot of the stuff that was concerned around the Montauk chair. Now, according to Nichols, who said that he was there and he worked on some of these projects, or he was experimented on, he said at one point they turned on the Montauk chair, and then they were supposed to leave it running until August 12th, 1983, at which point the wormhole opened, like back to 1943 when the Philadelphia experiment happened, and that was when Al Bielek claimed that him and his brother like came through the wormhole and stuff like that. So apparently the Philadelphia experiment, the Montauk chair, it was like a time portal, and it had like the energy, like the generator at both ends, so you could like go back and forth, blah blah blah. Now,
when does shit like this actually happen in real life?
that's
though?
never.
Where you're tying in 2 and 3 different famous paranormal cases. You're tying them all together.
That's what I mean, and it seems really interesting.
Especially how shaky the Philadelphia experiment story actually is.
Yeah.
I think maybe that was inspired by something that a crazy guy saw, probably degaussing. But I don't think that it happened now.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I feel like a lot of these stories were kind of like it was just one crazy dude like saying something or misinterpreting something or making something up.
And
then people are just repeating it and
Yeah.
being like, yeah, that sounds plausible.
And they're products of their time too. You have to really put them in the context of the 50s and the 60s and the 80s and what you could get away with in the 80s.
Yeah.
The satanic panic level lies. You could just lie. Or listen to what a kid said. And a kid said that, yeah, they flushed me down the toilet.
Yeah.
And
that was one of
appeared
my
there.
favorite things.
That's awesome. That's awesome when they flush you down the toilet.
Yeah.
And then you appear.
Like I said,
in the basement.
It was just like in Harry Potter where they go like
Yeah.
they travel like through the portals in the fireplaces, except it's in a toilet.
And then a group of 12 molesting fucking Satanists arrive in a hot air balloon.
Right.
That's a good one. Yeah. Wow, man.
I think I would have liked it better if they'd come in riding on ostriches, but that's
Some
just
of the
me.
weird shit that's out there today that I kind of think is plausible isn't. A lot of it isn't paranormal. Like all these military bases that we have, like Fort Campbell and Fort Benning and all the other big military bases. Are they interconnected with underground roads? That is actually kind of plausible.
Well, and that's not that crazy.
No.
I mean, that seems like it would be pretty pragmatic if
There's
they
stories
did have
about
the...
truckers that are sworn to secrecy, and they get in there, and there's like 2-lane highways. They go for hundreds of miles from one military
I mean, like
base.
I said, that wouldn't shock me because that would
There would be a precedent for that in strategic need.
Yeah, there would be a reason for
that.
it.
An underground highway system in case of a nuclear attack.
Yeah,
You could have done that back in the 50s and the 60s.
Or if they just had to transport things that they really, really didn't want anybody to know about or see, then yeah.
Like these nuclear weapons, maybe they're not transporting them by truck on the surface. Maybe they're transporting them underneath the ground where there's no chance of hijacking those trucks.
Yeah. So evidently there came a point, according to Nichols in one of his books about the Montauk Project, that they decided, even though these experiments had allegedly been successful, I mean, they had been able to do like time travel and all this other stuff, but supposedly they were like, no, we shouldn't be messing around with that, which, see, I don't buy that. Because if they did really discover that stuff, they'd be like, yeah, we need to get on that shit. But according to him, they're like, no, this is too dangerous. We can't do this anymore. So we're just going to have to stop the experiment. So evidently there was a contingency plan. So Duncan is in the Montauk chair, like the little psychic electromagnetic chair. Someone says to him, the time is now, at which point his subconscious, you're going to love this, produced a monster.
What? Oh, like Forbidden Planet.
And just like Stranger Things, where the Demogorgon is like is a product of Eleven's rage, I guess, or she was the one that summoned it with her psychic power. I think that was the implication anyway. So evidently this monster comes out, and it's like stomping all around the base and eating everything. And now the interesting thing that Nichols said in the book was that everyone said they saw the monster, but no one agreed what the monster looked like. So I guess everyone saw it as different for whatever reason.
Some guys even saw it as a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I know, right? Mother puss bucket. Yeah. But yeah, so so evidently after that happened, I don't know in the book if there was an account of how they destroyed the monster, if it was really there or what. But at this stage, Nichols is like, no, now we have to destroy the Montauk chair. And evidently that vanquished the beast, I suppose. And then they just decided they were going to shut the whole project down. Although...
That's a cool story, bro.
Although conspiracy theorists say, even though Nichols says in his book that in 1984, the project was stopped and they filled all the tunnels and stuff with concrete and blah, blah, blah. But conspiracy theorists still think that there's something weird going on at Montauk, and like they never really stopped doing these. They just wanted everybody to think that, because you know how that goes. And there's really nothing you can say to argue against people that think that. They're just like, oh, well, they were just brainwashed, oh, this and that and the other thing. So, as I said, I feel like this is more known now than it was, just because of Stranger Things and because it was based on that, because it has like a lot of parallels to it. I mean, obviously Stranger Things makes reference to like MK Ultra and stuff a little bit too, which actually did happen. But this one sounds a little out there. For
Yeah, and the weirdest thing that ever happens on Air Force bases, really, when you look at the big picture, is things like nuclear weapons being places they're not really supposed to be.
That's not weird.
And it's not that weird. It's just that for a certain reason they moved some nuclear weapons for a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Because, they thought they might have to use them. That type of deal.
Yeah, I feel like this, and I mean, as nutty as the Philadelphia experiment sounds, like with teleporting ships and like guys like being fused to ship hulls and stuff, I feel like it's a lot less weird than the stuff supposedly going on in the Montauk experiment. It's like, oops, we ripped a hole in space-time. There's a wormhole from 1943 to 1983. There's like a monster came out and started eating everything on the base and things of that nature. And it's
too detailed. It's too far-reaching. It's fan fiction.
It's instructive too that it seems like everybody that was supposedly a subject of this series of experiments only came up with stuff from, they were repressed memories, or they only came up with stuff like under hypnosis, or they only came up with stuff after they saw the movie about the Philadelphia experiment, or after they read about it or something. I'm not saying that people's memories can't be triggered by things that they see or read, because that does happen sometimes, but something that far-reaching happening to you, like when you were a kid or stuff, I feel like most of the time...
That could also be a euphemism for, I saw that movie and I had a really cool idea.
That's true.
I had a really cool idea after I saw that movie. Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Because, I mean, some of the people that came forward later, they, like you said, they added shit on to, like, other stuff, other experiments that were going on at Montauk, like, there was, aliens, grays, obviously, because they have to be brought into everything. There was something to do with the Montauk monster, that supposedly unidentified animal that washed up on the beach in Long Island.
This is the kind of case that is believed by people who want to believe some bullshit. It's too unlikely. I don't really think, it's too unlikely.
Yeah, and like I said, some of them said they saw lizard people. Some of them said they saw, this was one of my favorite quotes, extra-dimensional beings that appear in a humanoid shape made of hollow glass.
Oh, awesome.
So that's pretty imaginative, but so that seems a little weird, seems a little out there. I'm not saying that there's not aliens, there may be. Do I think they visited? I doubt it, but,
there's a big difference between a story like this.
Yeah.
And a story like, I was sitting in front of the television, I heard a noise, and I turned around and I saw my deceased mother.
Yeah.
And she, and then she vanished.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a common type story. You know what I mean? I saw my deceased mother and I felt good, and then she smiled and then she vanished. I'm much more apt to believe in something like that.
Because that's not crazy. That's not completely crazy.
Right.
It's something that is an experience that a lot of people have had.
Yeah, you can say, well, what is it? Is it your subconscious mind showing you an image that you needed to see in order to heal? Was it a psychic, empathic message sent to you from another dimension where your mother is now that made you see that image? Or was it, quantum particles of a soul? You can interpret it in many different ways. But still, it's just, I saw my dead mother.
Yeah.
I felt better.
It's not that outlandish.
It's not that outlandish.
It's not like we experiment on people and we brought a ship from 1943 and there's aliens and glass people.
Shit. And then, we all did this and I did that. And then we had to go back in time. And it's just too complicated. It's too much like a Hollywood movie script from science fiction.
Well, and like I said, it feels like
reality doesn't really work that way.
It feels like all of these stories didn't really come out until people started seeing the Philadelphia experiment going, that totally happened exactly like that. I was there. So, I feel like it's some people that are like a little prone to fantasy and not being able to distinguish. That too. Like I said, I don't know the intention. Like some people might just be crazy and actually did think that they experienced what they saw in a movie.
I think some of them just
some people might just like
tell
to
story
tell
to get on
stories.
TV,
Yeah.
That was back in a day. That was back in a time when, the media, it was before YouTube, the media was very restrictive, you know what I mean? Only a certain amount of people could make it on television. And if you made it onto a TV show, you could make a couple grand.
Yeah.
So there was incentive to come up with something like this.
Yeah.
If you could get on TV and you had a book to sell, you might make tens of thousands of dollars just because of that one TV appearance. And you made it on Geraldo.
And honestly, I feel like too, I think some people are like, oh well, why would they make that up? They didn't make any money from it. I don't think some people need to make money from it. I think some people just like the attention, or they just like to be on TV. They don't need like a financial incentive. I don't think. Some people just like being the center of attention and just like being paid attention to.
That's definitely the case with some of the UFO witnesses. Or people that said that they were involved. Some of them are that's definitely attention. But not all of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them. There's some of those cases. Even Michio Kaku said you can't dismiss some of those cases. Those really good ones, you can't dismiss
I agree with that.
Too many witnesses. There's also radar returns and pilots seeing the same object.
When there's corroborating evidence like that.
There.
Yeah.
Right.
When it's just one person saying I was in my car by myself and blah.
And it's an overweight middle-aged guy saying yes, a UFO came out, and a beautiful female alien came out, and she took me into the UFO, and we had sex, and I have children on other planets with her. There was actually a guy who said that back in the 50s.
I know.
And the guy weighed 300 pounds.
Yeah. So
his name was Elmer or some shit like
you
that.
can tell where the
coveralls and shit.
fantasy
And
was
Elmer
coming
said
from.
that. It's no.
She had green skin and 8 breasts.
Yeah, I would be more likely to believe that guy was working for the CIA to you know what I mean, to make the UFO community look bad.
Stupid. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Some people, I think maybe that might happen sometimes.
It's
I
possible.
think the CIA has used UFO tales as a cover for secret aircraft experiments, and
that would be a smart thing to do, actually.
Yeah.
When they were just doing like routine but super secret stuff.
I was going through some old UFO documentaries, television documentaries that I had seen when I was a kid, and one of them I was watching. I said, "Oh yeah, I remember this one," and it was maybe like from '81 or '82, and they had a woman she lived in a remote area. I don't remember exactly. I think it was the United States, and she said she heard a sound and turned around and saw a UFO coming at her, flying low. Went right over the little valley she was in, and then she saw it from the back and everything. And it moved over her head maybe 250 miles an hour, not that fast. She had it drawn. She drew it, and I'm looking at it, and it is definitely the front end of an F-117 stealth fighter. Definitely. You know what I mean? The angles,
Yeah.
and it's exactly what she saw. And I was thinking, to go, yeah, that's in the areas about where they would have been flying, something like that.
Right.
Flying it low and slow, which that's what that thing did. 200 miles an hour is slow for an aircraft. And she said it had lights on it, blinking lights. So yeah, saw it during the day. Yeah, so I was going like, yeah, that's a UFO, all right.
Well,
stealth fighter.
It's you to her, like unidentified
Yeah, from the
to
front,
her.
a stealth fighter looks like kind of like a jagged UFO. If you see a head-on shot. And she said it had spikes coming up. Yeah, that's the tail.
Yeah.
When it's coming at you. Right.
But yeah, see, so I feel like there's misidentification too.
Right.
I think, and that's probably the biggest. I think a lot of the claims that people make, I don't necessarily think that it's them just making stuff up out of whole cloth. I think a lot of times it's a misattribution, or they're seeing what they want to see.
Right.
Maybe.
In that particular case, they were talking to that woman. They actually had like, she was also on the news. I mean, they were taking her very seriously.
Yeah.
And they had guys from the Air Force going.
Did they tell her?
No, of course not. They were like, no, couldn't be. Could be.
Was that when it was secret still?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
why they didn't tell her.
Yeah,
Because
he
she said,
said,
duh,
"Nah,
that's a fucking,
nah,
yeah.
Nah.
No. But nowadays,
you go,
everybody
yeah,
does.
it's a stealth
Yeah,
fighter.
duh. Stupid woman. But she did see what she said she
Sure,
saw.
she did. I knew she was telling the truth. I saw it and go, that's stealth fighter.
Stealth fighter.
And in '81, you didn't see that.
That's just sad because
Yeah.
probably like the rest of her might she thought, I saw a UFO, but it
It
wasn't.
might not even been '81. It might have been around '80
Yeah.
or late '70s.
I can't remember when that was declassified.
I think that might have been declassified around '84.
Yeah, it was a long time
4 or
ago.
5,
I mean,
right.
because I remember knowing about them.
Right, but no, they're telling that story. I had to dig that shit up. Yeah, she's showing it, and we're going, that's a fucking stealth fighter.
I feel bad for that
Yeah, and
lady.
the Air Force guy's going, no way.
Aw, poor lady. Maybe I hope she knows now, or she found out later. So she would just
Yeah.
think that aliens were coming to visit in the planet.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, so this show has gone on far too long
Yeah.
already. So let's wrap this up. Hope you guys enjoyed our kind of rambling look. Well, we're always
Yeah.
rambling.
They
Rambling
like
look
it when
at
it goes long. They like it when it's
the Philadelphia experiment
Yeah,
and
Philadelphia
the Montauk
experiment.
Project.
Philadelphia experiment. Didn't happen. Cool story, but it didn't happen the way they said it did. Maybe inspired by something that Allende saw. His name? Allende?
Yeah, or Carl Allen, I think was his real name, but he
His
went
real
by
name.
Carlos.
Went by Hispanic version of it.
Yeah, that was
Carl
like that was
Allen.
like the most interesting man in the world version of himself.
Yeah, he's kind of creative and a little bit maybe, slightly, schizophrenic, and well, that's supposedly slightly schizophrenic, and he came up with a cool story.
Yeah, which it is.
Based
It's
on
very cool.
something
It's a cool story.
maybe he kind of saw, but it wasn't an experiment. And then some other lunatics came in and came up with it after seeing a movie about that, blew it up into something even bigger and more ridiculous.
And added time
more
wormholes
ridiculous,
and
yeah.
glass people
Yeah.
and aliens and interdimensional
Yeah.
stuff, and a
Yeah.
chair that like ramps up your psychic abilities.
Right.
I wish this chair did that. I could
It
do
does. You sit that shit and all kinds of cool shit.
Right. Okay, so just remember, if you like the show, do like, share, subscribe on all your social media. Share with all your friends, relatives, and even people you don't like. we can be used as punishment. Also, if you'd like to financially support the show, you can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Remember to check out our last movie review, which was The Howling, and if you haven't seen our new little show, which is called 13 O'Clock Matinee, where we review 3 new movies that we see every week, then check that out. I'm going to try and put up new episodes every Sunday of all the new movies that we saw in the theaters this week. And also, if you would like your Halloween stories, fiction or nonfiction, read on our Halloween show, please try to get them to me before the 19th, because we're going to be recording sometime between the 19th and the 21st, the Halloween show. So this is kind of your last chance. If you want to send us some stuff, send it to gravecake@gmail.com. And that will do it for episode 113. We will see you next time. Bye.